What is going on, you fine folks, and welcome on to another edition of the Business of Social podcast powered by STN Digital. I'm your host, David Brickley. Each and every show, we talk to the experts to get the lowdown on the ever-changing digital social marketing agency. This show is no different. Episode number 64, Mr. William Kelly. Producer Will, as always, we like to thank Dave Firk for all his help as well. But Producer Will, 64, what do you got for me this show?
So we're diving back into the celebrity age. 64 got some heavy hitters, so I'll roll through them real quick here. Tom Hanks, Steve Harvey, Vanna White, the great Vanna White, Kim Cattrall, Katie Couric, Joe Montana, Randy Jackson, Larry Bird, Spike Lee, Christoph Waltz, Linda Hamilton, and one more, Sugar Ray Leonard.
Sugar Ray Leonard. We've had Sugar Ray's son come speak to our group here at STN.
That is true. Yeah, nice call.
Doing some great activist work out there. It's between Tom Hanks and Steve Harvey, I think. Will, I'm going to let you pick this one.
I'm going to have to go with your man, Steve Harvey. Everybody loves Steve Harvey. Not
Great smile.
Yeah, it's just he can brighten up any room.
Hardest worker on television. Got his own show, got the Family Feud. I mean, slight mishap there on Miss America, I believe, but he's
still a great night. Still a great night.
All right, so today we have a great episode for you. Alec Palmer, he's the director of product of Momentum. So Momentum is an athlete-driven media company, kind of similar, Will, to the Uninterrupted and the I Am Athlete model. But those of you who don't know, Trevor Bauer and his co-founder Tyke founded Momentum back in 2019. Their goal is to share authentic player stories and really change the public perception of baseball. And I'm excited to get into this with Alec because I think baseball, Will, has struggled with really finding their consumer online. A lot of that has to do from the restrictions that you and I both have seen in our line of work here at STN with baseball and BAM and things like that. But it's interesting what Trevor's doing because I like what he said recently on a video I watched that he wanted to go after Ken Rosenthal and called him a gossip blogger about a recent report he came out with. He's like, I want to tell my story, man. I want to give you guys the lowdown of what really happened. And this is what we've been talking about for so often is like these athletes have their own megaphone. They just got to use it.
I think they have a really interesting take where it's specific to baseball, and I think Bauer is going to be that guy that tries his hardest to break the mold of this is just like an old person's game and the same old stereotype and pastime. So excited to hear kind of their thoughts and what their strategies are to break through and put the focus on more of their younger players and kind of be more outspoken.
Awesome. So I'm excited for this one. Episode number 64, Alec Palmer, the director of product over at Momentum. All right, he is the director of product at Momentum. Alec Palmer joins us on the Business of Social. Alec, thanks so much for the time, man. We appreciate it.
No problem. Appreciate having me on. I'm excited to get this. Like listening already, so excited to hear my own voice.
Yeah, right. There you go. It's always weird hearing your own voice when you hear it back, so hopefully you'll get used to it. All right, so I would love to just start off with tell us a little bit about Momentum overall and what you do day to day as your role as director of product.
Yeah. So as director of product, basically manning and managing all the revenue generating initiatives. So looking at that kind of through a modified agency model, you're looking at merchandise, you're looking at partnerships, sponsorships, those types of things. And then as we're actually growing, we're actually bringing on creators. So managing and monitoring all of their revenue initiatives. So not just partnerships and merchandise through Momentum, but we've recently brought on Pitching Ninja, Eric Sim, Paige Halstead, their merchandise, getting them up and running, their partnerships as well. So day to day, it's looking a ton of emails as we all have. But it's a lot about building networks, a lot about building connections, relationships, a ton of the great ones. Shout out to my guy, Dominic at Manscaped. We talk every day about different things. He's awesome, but it's a lot of building relationships, a lot of emails, a lot of kind of overarching kind of management work and kind of oversight, and that's something that I generally like to do more than the day to day, and I think most people would probably agree. But managing our contractors, so when we're working with designers for merchandise, working with our web developer, our e-commerce contractor, those types of things, making sure all of that's running smoothly, as well as aiding our social and content team on anything they might need. So day to day, like I said, a lot of management of partnerships, of networks, but as a startup too, a lot of creating processes and creating systems that didn't yet exist because we haven't come face to face with those problems yet. So one thing like right now we're going through is our creator kind of communication and funnel. So who's getting paid, when they're getting paid, how we're reporting, all of those things. And we're looking at how we're classifying our merchandise, how we're classifying our creators, how we're doing all these things. So, building pretty much exactly from the ground up. And what's it saying? You're building the plane while you're flying it. There's no other way to build a startup than that. So it's all over the place, but that's what makes it fun.
Alec, you're talking my love language, system and processes. I'm a big fan. But walk me through some Momentum, obviously co-founded by the reigning Cy Young winner, Trevor Bauer of the LA Dodgers. So he decides that he wants to have his own voice. He wants to be able to tell his own narrative, which I think a lot of athletes are starting to realize they have that power. But for Momentum, walk the audience through, if you will. It starts with Trevor, but aspirations to bring on more athletes, tell more stories. Like, what's the overall vision for Momentum as a company?
Yeah, as I'm sure Trevor and Tyke, his co-founder, would say the same thing. We've gone through 9 million iterations of what we want to do and what the business model is going to be and all of that. Very early on, it was meant to be something. It was more educational. Here's how you do these things, and then it kind of morphed into let's sign athletes like an agency, and then it kind of more. It's been through a bunch of different ways, and what we've seen is the best way is we want to give athletes that platform. Our mission statement: we're connecting fans with athletes through storytelling. So anything we can do to help that message, to help that mission, is what we're trying to do. So looking forward, what we're trying to do is right now we're bringing on a lot of creators. So I mentioned earlier, but Paige Halstead, she's a professional softball player. Eric Sim, the king of JUCO, he's a huge kind of big brash personality in the online baseball world. And then Pitching Ninja is, I'm sure anybody who has a lick of baseball interest probably has seen his stuff. But they're all great, and that's something we really latched onto. We saw that people were really responding to personalities. And one thing that we've always kind of held close to our heart is, you can talk all about your brand and your everything, but people really want to see and relate to a personality. And that's what we saw with our creators. So looking forward, that's kind of where we're going. And then in addition, we also have Trevor, who's considered a creator for us. And then Rachel Luba, his agent, also as a creator. So looking down that path, we'd love to bring on more athletes working consistently. We've done a ton of stuff with one-offs or one show or one documentary, and those have been great. However, COVID kind of threw a wrench into that. We couldn't work directly with players. So we've stayed afloat. We've survived that. And now we're looking forward to we're hoping to bring on some other people we've worked together with a lot, looking at the Mike Clevengers of the world, the Nick Heaths of the world, people we've worked with, people who really have an eye or an interest in creating content. And then we're going to continue to expand, because at the end of the day, we want to be able to say Momentum is the place to be for baseball content. And then who knows, maybe in the future we'll expand into some other sports.
Because that was what I was wondering, because you look at like what LeBron and Maverick Carter have done with Uninterrupted. Even I Am Athlete, love the podcast with Ocho Cinco and Brandon Marshall. But would you consider yourself kind of in that same sphere, or you guys are kind of going after a different market?
Yeah, I would say for comparison reasons, yes.
Okay.
An Uninterrupted, The Ringer, Barstool Sports, kind of in that world. However, there's been nothing in that baseball world. I think John Boy
100%
is very similar. They're very new as well. But still, baseball has kind of been left behind. And when we look at the NFL, we look at the NBA, the personalities and the culture is way different. So that's just number one. It's way more primed to produce content. But then we look at baseball and we see all the personalities and we know that it's just primed. It just hasn't been shown, and helping to change that culture is kind of what we're striving for. Yeah,
I'd love to get your thoughts on that, because I've talked so much. We talk about the NFL. They have the problem of having the helmet on, right? So they're not as up close and personal as the James Hardens and the LeBron James. But it's always been interesting with baseball. I know there's like a joke going around essentially if Mike Trout walked in a mall, not many people would recognize who he is, even though he's like the biggest star on the planet when it comes to baseball. Why do you think that baseball struggled so much with just having the individual athletes kind of break through? Because, I mean, as you know, some of these guys have so many amazing personalities. They connect well with your audience and all those different things. But for whatever reason, when it comes to like social and kind of that youth culture, baseball has kind of been a step behind.
So I think kind of a few different things. The very practical reason is baseball players generally aren't as physically noticeable as other players. So NFL players generally much larger, more muscular. NBA players much taller.
Aaron Judge just called. He wants to repeat that comment.
Exactly. But again, like there's very few guys who will walk in front of you and be like, oh, they're definitely a pro athlete. And that's not a condemnation on anyone. They're all very talented athletes. It's a different body style. It's a different type. So I think one is kind of like the very practical reason is they look very similar. And I always make fun of Trevor and poke fun at him saying, he just looks like every other white guy with a beard. Yeah. And, but he's a reigning Cy Young. So it's one, I think, is very practical. Two, I think the culture is just so different. It's traditionally been held as the old white guy sport. And I think we can all agree that it is. And, and not even saying it's an opinion, it's factual.
Yeah.
The average, I think the average fan is 53 years old.
55, around there.
Yeah. Something like that. So, we're fighting that right away. And then two, baseball just has had a tough time being exciting for people. When I think I pardon me for not bringing the statistic here, but I think on average football games NFL games are lasting longer than baseball games in terms of time duration. So that argument has kind of been, it's stuck baseball. It's boring. It's slow. It's whatever. But to me, it's the culture. This is something that kind of grows from within. If you look at the NBA, you look at the NFL, teammates are generally more supportive. Coaches are generally more supportive. The league is generally more supportive. And I think we've all seen Adam Silver kind of take that initiative and be supportive of his players. It's very player driven. When you're even coming down to watching, big matchups, it's marketed as player A versus player B. It's not the team versus the team. Yep. We don't see that in baseball. We have started to see a shift, but baseball has long been stuck in this tradition. And tradition is both baseball's biggest strength and biggest weakness, where, we can say, oh, well, look, it's America's pastime. It has all this history. And yes, but we can't stick there. We can't stay there. So to me, it's a very deep cultural change that needs to happen. And that goes from, the league, yes, player marketing has done a great job, and especially in the last few years, they're MLB creatives. I have to give them all the credit. They're incredible, but it's the suits kind of getting in the way is from what I've heard and what generally us as innovators have run into. But looking into even inside the clubhouses, when we're talking to guys like, well, I don't want to post because I didn't make it yet. I haven't been in the locker room long enough. I don't have a voice. And we're looking at it and saying, well, you do, you can establish that. And a lot of the times baseball is really baseball and hockey, specifically in the NHL, I've seen have been a lot of parallels in terms of that. It's very much, you're about the team. Don't make a fool of yourself. Don't make people look at you. But
almost as if it's somewhat frowned upon. Like don't spend time on that garbage type mentality.
Yep. It's very frustrating. And that's the biggest thing. And we held a branding workshop, the spring training that COVID ended. We held a branding workshop with I think we had 50 plus minor leaguers and MLB guys there. We had Blake Lawrence from Open Doors. I believe he was on here.
Yep.
We had Marissa Mast. She's a director of digital, I think, at the Arizona Coyotes. And we had a guy, Vince Panazzo from Instagram and Facebook Sports. And they spoke. And one player ended up speaking up and saying, he was drafted, I forget the team. And they told him he's not allowed to wear team insignia gear until he's made it to the league. And he's like, well, I'm proud to say I got drafted by you.
But the fans can.
Yeah. And he's like, why can't I wear this, the shirt that says my team name or the hat? And it's stuff like that really pounds it out. And that is something that culture is grown through minor leagues, where it's pounded out of you to, shut your mouth, don't make it. You're going to put in your time and, you'll be there for 10 years.
Yeah. And I think the big thing I've seen on the media side is, the NBA has been very loose with their rules. And if their fans want to share a Russell Westbrook dunk, they can share a Russell Westbrook dunk. And the MLB for a long time has tried to protect those rights so they can sell those rights. And you get it from a revenue standpoint, but it really does hurt the earned media value of your fans distributing your content and making other fans from just being able to see stuff on your timeline. I think all of us have probably become Steph Curry fans, not so much from watching every single Golden State Warrior game locally, but from the highlights and the stuff we see online.
Yeah, I mean, you can see Steph Curry hit a three in a meaningless Tuesday game at the beginning of the season, and it's all over SportsCenter. But Tyler Glass now has an incredible outing in the playoffs, and you don't see anything. You might see one, and that's it's tough. From everything from the RSNs, the regional sports networks, kind of eating up those media rights. But, I can barely watch an Indians game, and I live in Cleveland. And
don't get me started on the Dodgers issues we had for years with.
Learning more and more about blackouts has been, we ended up capitalizing on it and putting some merchandise out. But, the poor fans in Iowa who are blacked out from like 5 or 6 teams, and Vegas fans are blacked out from like 7 or so teams. I'm just like, how do you expect people to enjoy the game if they can't even watch it?
Right. Yeah, so I think it's interesting. It's and I do think it's like the time is now, and I think it's so interesting what Trevor and Tyke did here, because I love what I saw recently from Trevor on YouTube. He's all calling Ken Rosenthal the gossip blogger, but to his point, he's like, I want to be able to speak my own truth and have my own narrative and not rely on these bloggers. And I think or just rely on the media, which was so much used to be. I mean, they always tell the story of Kobe had Jim Gray and Shaq had Jim Hill in LA, and they would get stories through the media. But now the athlete, as we have preached, and you and I preach for so often, I'm sure, is they have the microphone, they have the audience, and all they have to do is use it. So it's really interesting what I've seen Trevor do, and much like what we saw during the NBA bubble, doing some of that vlog series style series with JaVale McGee and Matisse Thybulle. Yep. Really, really amazing stuff that I think what Trevor's doing, what Matisse and JaVale did this year, you haven't really seen that Casey Neistat, type of vlog before from an athlete. And I just think, and I would love to get your thoughts, and that's going to continue to be more of the norm, especially as these younger kids come up and they just grew up with a phone in their hand.
Yeah, I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head. It's definitely the future. We're just trying to figure out how big this is going to get. And I think the one thing, especially in baseball, I think the league and the RSNs and all the traditional media outlets are kind of scared of is athletes taking it back. And to me, like, they should. To me, I think that's how it should happen. And you're right.
Like, what is baseball's LeBron decision moment? Because that's like when everything changed from like the athlete taking control and the athlete having the leverage in the league. And baseball hasn't had that moment yet. So when is it going to be, right?
Yeah, I know. It's got to be very similar, I would imagine. I think, as you've seen, if you even look back the last few years of like free agency, it's slowly become more about the player, and like less people are, the owner, who cares? No one cares about the owners anymore. No one cares about, what's happening. You saw, Trevor, I was honored to be able to follow him when he got traded from the Indians to the Reds. And that was like, I mean, not to put it, brag about it. Like, that was one of the first kind of real behind the scenes looks of what happens in a trade.
Right.
And it was something, we just kind of threw it together, and it was great. I mean, it was planned, but in terms of like, we knew we were going to do it if he got traded, but that was one of the first things. Then we saw that, even in football, look at like JJ Watt announced his own thing. And, Tom Brady has been a huge maverick in that. So I don't know what baseball's kind of the decision moment is going to be. I'd love if Trevor does it, because that's always good for business. But I have to imagine it's going to be very similar in terms of a free agency signing, or, hell, it could even be like a big prospect making a decision, because that's where we're seeing the biggest buy-in is all these younger guys, even guys in the minor leagues who are like, well, I know I've grown up with this. I've watched YouTube my whole career. I've watched this and I'm ready. But then when we also talk about is what we talked about earlier, that mindset gets beaten out of them because of that baseball old culture saying you shouldn't be doing this. But, props to the people who fight through and do it.
So let me ask you this. I mean, if you can snap your fingers and, every MLB athlete was asking Alec, what do you recommend I do starting tomorrow? What is like the ideal scenario for me using my platform, creating content, things like that? Like, what are some of the key tenets that you preach currently and you wish more athletes would do to kind of take advantage of their stardom or take advantage of their audience?
I think the first thing is you just really need to figure out who you are and who you want to be. Because I think something, I played baseball my whole life, and I felt, granted it was Division III level, but it was the highest I ever played. But even in baseball, just in general, you feel that pressure to kind of conform to the team and everything. You might think of, oh, I am this way, but really it was because you've played in this this organization or whatever. So I think first and foremost, you have to figure out who you are, figure out what you like, figure out the different things you enjoy, because not everyone has to be this mega social media star.
Right.
Not every player is built for that. Not every player even wants to have a social media profile. And I think that's the biggest thing that we're seeing right now, is this over kind of saturation of like, well, everyone has to post all these cool pictures. Everyone has to do a vlog. Everyone has to post, and you don't. Simply put, every athlete needs to do what's right for them. So first you need to figure out who you are and figure out what you want to do. And if you do choose to do content and push yourself more, then let's do it. And I think secondary, you have to just be true to yourself. And that's what I kind of, even before offline, we were talking about how everyone has a guru and a hack to do whatever. And it's just, we can all talk about the best marketing strategies and best social strategies, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, it's going to be whatever works for you and your demographic. And that's the hardest part, that athletes just don't have the education. That's where people like, Momentum come in, or people like, Trevor's marketing agent, Morgan Blank, who's starting Brainerd Sports. That's where those people come in. And, I know a handful of great marketing agents too. So to me, it's figuring out what you want to do and then get the resources to help you. And you're not going to have that instant fame. You're not going to have that overnight kind of sensation. It's going to be work. You're going to fail. People are going to kind of get on your ass a little bit about it. You're going to have to make sure you're not reading all the comments of like whatever. It's like Lakers fan 8756. Why you spend so much time on social media? You should be spending more time in the gym.
You found our producer Will's burner account. All right. I know that account well.
Yeah, exactly. That to me is, I don't want to say it's like a cop out of an answer, but you have to figure out who you are, what you want to do, and then find the resources that will help you execute.
Yeah, and not everybody's going to feel comfortable to do a vlog that's a very personable experience, but they may feel comfortable with fashion. They may feel comfortable with, or very passionate about cooking and food, and that kind of becomes their thing. No different than, a television channel having different sitcoms or different pieces of content they put out there.
Exactly.
I want to get your thoughts on, you mentioned that you're working a lot with partners, and one thing that, I think Blake and I have talked about this on this program, and I've kind of been screaming this for a couple of years now too, is, there's no doubt these athletes should be monetizing their platforms to the fullest of their advantage as well. So, looking at Trevor, for example, he's producing this original content. The fans enjoy it. It's getting a ton of views. It's on a consistent schedule. How much luck have you all had on actually attaching a brand, to these different content pieces and different systematic content, and where have you found the success there?
Yeah. The first hurdle was convincing people that we existed. That was the first thing was, oh yeah, we have this channel, and look at this, this pro athlete who invested in us and who founded the company.
Yep.
That was the first hurdle. Was one, hey, we've got good stuff. Two was getting people to pay us a fair price for it. And that's, to me, it's something I learned very quickly was, you have a price in your mind what it's worth, but most likely no one's going to pay that straight up right away because they don't believe it. It's a good business decision. I get it. Where we've seen success though is the stuff that is the people are engaged with. It's not always going to be our biggest viewership. It's not always going to be our biggest listenership. But if you have those diehard fans, if you have those people who are like, I can't wait for the next one. That's where we've seen the success. And I mentioned Manscaped. They were a great one. We've been doing a ton of stuff with them, have a ton more coming up. And that was something we built. It was, hey, let's do a test on one thing. Wow, this performed really well. Let's try another couple of things. What's similar to this property? Now we've grown it and grown it. Now we're going to be doing a lot more with them. We have that. And then on Trevor's side, we had First Star Logistics, which is a logistical company in Cincinnati. And they just loved Trevor, and they were like, we think this will be a great opportunity for us to get this demographic that we'll never be able to get in our traditional marketing. Yep. So let's do it. And they bought, I think, 16 episodes of the vlog, the off-season vlog, which was fantastic. Awesome. So when we're looking with partners, it's one, we have to find a genuine partner. I think there's so many people out there who just get the cash grab. Is that $1,000? Is that, $1,500 worth kind of cheapening your brand a little bit? We don't know. And to us, it's not. And when we look at those things, it has to be someone that aligns with us. Again, I'll keep around Manscaped because they're great. They align, they let us be us. They let us be creative. They give us some guidelines and like, go for it. We trust you. And that's all we can ever ask. So when we're looking at partners we want to work with, it's generally not the people who are like, it has to be exactly like this. You have to read these exact words. If it's not, too bad. Sure, we can get some money out of them, but it's not as genuine.
Right. It's not genuine or authentic. Yep. Where do you think everything's going over the next 5 years or so? I mean, not only with MLB, but athletes. I mean, you guys obviously have a vision at Momentum, but we'd just love to kind of hear what you're excited about, where you think the opportunity is.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm just excited for baseball to feel this culture change. I think it's so long in the making. Even looking back in the 90s when the steroid era, people loved watching baseball. And we put out a shirt kind of tongue in cheek, steroids save baseball. And like, do I fully believe that? Maybe, maybe not. But did it help get people excited about baseball and, all that? Yes. And it was kind of shut down in the early 2000s, kind of after McGuire and then kind of were out. And then we got into this kind of, I don't want to say neutered kind of area of baseball where, do you really remember anything from about 2009 to 2014, 15 of baseball?
Yeah.
Like outside of being a specific fan, I'm a Pirates fan, and they had 3 good years in there, and it was amazing. That's all I remember. So when I'm looking at it, I'm just excited for baseball to change. I'm excited for the culture to move, and I think we are getting there. I think when you look at what MLB is even doing, and I won't give the credit to the suits because they don't deserve the credit, but I do give all the credit to the player marketing team. I give the credit to their marketing department. I give the credit to the creatives that are on the ground. I've met so many amazing people and creatives and so many talented people who are working absolute insane hours, doing all they can to make it better. And they really are. And what's the phrase? Imitation is the best form of flattery.
Yeah.
We're seeing on MLB originals, they're doing a lot of very similar things that we're doing. And to us, people were like, oh, look at them copying. That's not what we're looking at. We're looking at a rising sea lifts all ships. If they're buying in, we can tell that the players are starting to buy in. The league is starting to buy in.
Well, and to your earlier point, I think the fact if you can say, hey, listen, player X, we just made Trevor, whoever else, this amount of money on his social and digital content, that starts to raise some eyebrows. Like, wait a second, I can make how much? Like, yeah. So if you want to start taking this seriously, let us know. But you literally have a cash cow like waiting there for the taking if you're down. I think that changes the game for all athletes right there.
I definitely think it does. And I think, again, it's finding those guys who are genuinely interested, because there's a lot of guys who just aren't going to be. And I think, to me, that will be the biggest fault of people in this industry if they try to force people who don't want to do it. Then we're going to see a lot of failures. And to me, that's what we don't want to have, because you'll start to be more hesitant. We'll be like, well, this guy didn't do very well and he tried it. And well, he wasn't committed. And I put out a tweet thread a couple weeks ago now about this very issue. And there's marketability on the y-axis, and there's kind of interest level and commitment on the x-axis. And wherever you are, there's not necessarily saying you can't be successful from any of those 4 quadrants, but it sets you up and your focus is much different. So if you're very highly marketable and not committed, it's going to be a harder fight for you to get out good content. You're just going to naturally make up for it because you're very marketable. And you flip that, you're not very marketable per se, but you're super committed. The work to get there is going to be way harder, but we know we can rely on you to do that. So I think that's something we really need to kind of keep in mind as we grow. And as weird as it sounds, like, not everybody needs a brand. That, simply put, that's just it. And I think if we force everyone to, we'll start to see a lot of recidivism and people just kind of fall back from it.
I do think also, though, like, there is a way to not be the charismatic person in front of the camera and still have a consistent strategy, especially when it comes to these athletes. I mean, when it comes to milestones and quotes and what's being said about them and UGC and shouting out your fans. I think what I've seen on the agency side, Alec, is athletes are still not really willing to invest a ton of money in their social, even in 2021, which seems kind of silly, but they don't want to drop the 10, 15 grand a month for an agency to kind of help them create consistent content, because obviously they want to make sure there's an ROI there. But even without creating those original amazing pieces that maybe some other players will do, there's still a lot of that systematic content and that behind the scenes content that is relatively low lift for a lot of athletes. And I think you and I can agree with just a little bit of strategy and a little bit of coaching and a little bit of help. I mean, some of these shy guys or whatever it may be can actually put a pretty decent, systematic, consistent strategy together.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think the biggest issue we're running into and guys are running into is the content piece. They don't even know where to start. They don't know what to have. They don't know what post, they don't know what to post, what not to post. And that's another thing I'll give praise to MLB, and their LCCs and their VCCs are really killing it, is they're giving people the content to post. And even if you're just a guy who just posts every time you get a good photo of you being on the field and post it, that's fine. And people will still like that. They just want to feel, they want to know the human in that jersey. They don't want to know, oh, well, this is just, Trevor Bauer, the Dodgers pitcher. They want to know, who's Trevor? Why should I like him? And it's come down to stuff as stupid as, like, when we have a guy who swears and people are like, I swear too. Like, he's just a normal guy. And it seems so simple and so stupid, but it's as simple as those things where just giving people a look into your life, whether that's an Instagram story of you at dinner with, maybe your wife or your friends. It's simple things like that.
Yeah, fans love to see the curtain being pulled back. I mean, that's just what we all love to see. Well, cool, man. I want to get some rapid fire questions here towards the end to get your thoughts on. Being a marketer yourself, any social or marketing follows or newsletters or anything that you just couldn't live without and recommend people check out?
Yeah, I'm huge on Twitter. It's where I spend most of all my time. I set a time limit on there for my screen time. So, I'm a huge believer in getting inspiration from outside your industry. Yeah, I think that is the worst thing you can do is only look at people who are kind of creating the same thing as you. There's so much more than you can take in. So I'm looking at South Carolina football. They've been amazing. I think it was like Andrew Stewart was there for a while. I mean, some of these people there are absolute crazy talented. I mean, they built a giant ops building pretty much just for like some creative stuff. Yeah. Ohio State football. I mean, I'm in Ohio. To me, they're still the gold standard across the board. One, on the field, I'll brag there, but two, off the field too. They're amazing. Some of those people there. Open doors as well. Blake and I have built a great relationship, and I'm really happy to call him a friend and kind of learn from him. They put out a bunch of great stuff. So love following them. And then some individuals. I mean, I'll do a plug for Scott Ohashi is our director of photography. He's an incredible talent. He was actually a wedding videographer, kind of more documentary storytelling before he got in with us. So, has a crazy good eye there.
Don't sleep on wedding videographers, because they're some of the best at being able to tell a story through those videos. So that's all you need in all content.
He's unbelievable. And if you watch our Arizona Fall League on the Fence series, he shot and edited all of that. Shout out to him. And then a few others. I mean, Tyson Hutchins, he's incredible. He's a videographer. Down in Clemson now, I believe. He's been great. And then the one weird one is Slim Jim. I don't know if you follow them on Instagram.
They're great.
They are the most chaotic brand I've ever followed, but it's stuff like that where I look at it, I'm like, what can I learn from what they're doing? Right. And that is something that I look at and like, they made the decision to just be people like to follow them. And because everyone knows what a Slim Jim is already. There's no brand awareness you have to raise there. It's just getting people like, that's funny. Maybe I should go get a Slim Jim. Yeah. And that's what I like to say is, follow directors, follow like drama movie videographers, follow anybody outside of your industry, because you start to understand that. Another last one I'll say, I know it was supposed to be rapid fire, but concert photographers and concert videographers and in the music industry, music video, I think is one of the coolest industries to follow. You get such a different perspective on creative from them.
I like that. Being that you also teach students, any book that you've read recently or in the past that you recommend everybody take a look at?
Yeah, so two that I really like is, again, it's kind of outside of it, but The Last Lecture by Randy Pausch is a book that I think everyone on earth should read, just to kind of pull back, kind of recenter yourself, understand that, and you really start to understand more about life in general. But two, then Now Try Something Weirder by Michael Johnson. You've seen that. It's such a cool, easy read, but it's one of those things. It's stories and short stories from like advertising agencies, marketing firms, all these different things. And it's like tiny little anecdotes. And there's so many that I just pull and I'm like, that makes sense. I can apply that lesson to what I'm doing now. And to me, if I was giving 2 books, those are the 2 books I'd give to everyone now.
Yeah, man, to give you your final question, I know we kind of talked about finding your voice, finding your lane. Yeah. But yeah, any advice? I mean, you're obviously a former athlete and now you're working in marketing, working in professional sports. But for anybody coming up, any advice or stuff that you've learned throughout your career that you would share?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's we've touched on it a couple times, but making sure you know the difference between connecting with people to connect and connecting just to connect. And what I mean by that is you want to build genuine friendships. You want to build genuine relationships with the people you're connecting with. You don't want to just be that person who DMs someone every time there's a job opportunity and you're like, hey, can you put in a good word? And it's like, I don't even know who you are. Never talked to you ever. And that's, to me, is like one of the reasons I always got turned off by LinkedIn, was it very much felt that way. And there's a lot of people just kind of connecting, just getting as many people as you can. But to me, it's all about building those connections. It's all about building relationships and making sure that you're maintaining those, because you don't know when those relationships might come into play. You could, we might connect here and then 10 years down the road, all of a sudden we're meeting up again and something happens. So that, and then I think just taking upon yourself to learn those new skills and don't feel like there's one way to get to where you want to go. There's so many people. I have guest speakers in my class that I teach 2 or 3 a semester. And the reason that they're all different kind of areas in sports. And the reason I do that is to show how different every single person's background is. Right. I just had one of my buddies as a photographer with the Cavs. He was a history major who graduated early, then decided he wanted to get into this. I had another person who, worked for 84 Lumber, which is a lumber company in Pittsburgh. And now he's working for Adidas in their, sales position. So there's so many different opportunities. And hell, I was an accounting major, got my MBA, and then I'm on quite the opposite of accounting and creative.
Right.
I just, working in sports, I think you see so many people, you hear so many stories, how different everyone's pathways are. And that's just something that I just don't think is communicated enough to the people who are coming up. You don't feel pressured.
Yeah, it's fun. I get that question all the time. Like, what's your advice for networking? And I saw a quote recently that rang true, was networking is literally 100% of all your interactions.
Yes.
Like, networking isn't this thing you work on like for an hour with somebody, but literally every human interaction you have is your networking. So I love what you said there earlier. Just kind of take that seriously, understand what that can lead to, for sure. Well, Alec, really love what you guys are doing over Momentum and all the great stuff obviously Trevor's working on. And it was really interesting kind of diving into, what's happening right now, not only in baseball, what could be in the future. So appreciate all the knowledge you dropped, man.
I appreciate you having me on. This was awesome. Let me know if you ever need anything, for sure.
Thanks so much, Alec. Appreciate it, man.
Yep.
All right, thanks so much to Alec Palmer for joining us on the program. A lot of good stuff there. He also teaches sport technology and sports marketing coming up next year as well. So kind of moonlighting as the professor there as well, Alec Palmer. Well,
guy does it all. He's a jack of all trades.
Well, thank you so much to him for all the insight and knowledge. Again, I really enjoyed. We never really talked about baseball and kind of the honest struggles that they've had, and then what they're trying to do to change that. And I think what Trevor's doing is really interesting, and Momentum trying to become not only. I think there's a lot of media companies. I mean, KD has one, LeBron has one. All these different individuals are starting these media companies. However, baseball, that's one that you really don't see that often. And I love what he said there, Will, too. It's just this kind of like frowned upon mentality of like, hey, don't show off. It's a team game. It's, America's pastime. No need for you to build your own brand. And in reality, that's exactly what these guys should be doing, because that's how you can, continue to make money off the field, off the diamond, and of course, post-career, be able to build a foundation for you and your family. So.
And I think if you haven't checked it out, go to Bauer's YouTube channel. It's great. I mean, he's literally in the dugout on game day interviewing people. He shows you how he warms up. Then he goes through like his breakdowns. He just does a really good job of bringing you behind the scenes.
And we gave shout outs to JaVale McGee and Matisse Thybulle too during the bubble. I know we talked about it on this program before, but that was amazing, man. I felt like I was in the bubble with those guys. And I think talking about, what we always say is taking a peek behind the curtain. That's not just a peek behind the curtain. That's like literally you are with them in the driver's seat behind the scenes. And I think the more athletes that do this and actually spend time and effort on that type of content are going to end up, being the guys that have the highest Q ratings because, I read something recently, Will, that YouTube Kids year over year was up 80%, and Nickelodeon has lost 60% of their audience on linear over the last 10 years. So this is where everybody's going for their content. So if you can be a staple of people's day, you'll increase your Q rating for sure.
And I think you'll get a lot of people who are becoming Trevor Bauer fans. So whether he stays at the Dodgers or goes back to the team, they'll just support him wherever he goes for the rest of his career.
Awesome. So thanks so much to Alec Palmer. Thank you for producer Will for setting all this up as usual, and as David Furker for all his help as well. This has been another edition of the Business of Social podcast. My name is David Brickley, and it's been powered by STN Digital.